Welcome back to the podcast, and it is the return of the solo Q&A. For those that have been here for a long time, this is every 9 episodes, and it's questions that come across from the listeners on Instagram, my email list, and my recently launched Patreon as well. We've got about 27 to get through, and we won't hang around. We'll start off with number one. Any chance of you going anywhere else on holiday except from Dubai? In my defense, I did go to Ibiza twice this year, but I am certainly somebody that knows what he enjoys and what he likes, and he basically lets it kill him. And Dubai was somewhere that it ticks a box for me in my kind of strange mindset where I like to feel like I'm relaxing on holiday, but I'm also working and getting stuff done. And when I've been there, I've mostly remote worked. I've been able to do the podcast. I've been able to socialize. I've been able to tick the boxes that I really enjoy. And it's something that I can square up in my own head rather than the likes of a Ibiza holiday where it's very much full blown party mode, switching off, enjoying myself, summer call as we were calling it, and just being able to unwind. So yeah, Dubai I'm sure will be on the agenda again for 2025. Who knows where else I'll go, but I'll certainly build in other holidays. In fact, I do recently just booked flights for Barcelona for a friend's stag do who I'm grooming for. So that will be a new destination for me. Question number two, are you still keeping up the boxing? Boxing was something that I started in January 2023, so just over 2 years ago now. And I enjoyed a lot of the benefits I got from it in terms of I saw quite quick improvement because I was so terrible to start with and I was so wooden and so stiff. And I was still probably a bit wooden and stiff by the end. I'm sure my coach would tell you that. But towards July time, just before I went to Ibiza the last time, I was pretty much just focusing on training for aesthetics as much as possible, and boxing just kind of fell away from that from like a really strategic perspective in terms of maximal muscle tissue. Boxing on a Monday or a Tuesday meant that my pressing and my pulling was weaker later in the week. So I was just like, right, I'm just going to cut this out for now and I'll go back to it when it suits. And it hasn't really suited. I've got a question later on about running and high rocks, so I'll probably cover that in a bit more depth later there. But my training for the next year, when my injury allows, will be more focused on the functional side of fitness as well as, of course, looking as good as I can. But boxing probably won't form a part of that. Just there's only so many things you can do. The priority principle. Number three, when you take the stairs over the escalator, what's the voice in your head saying? It's a bit of an odd concept, isn't it? But our inner dialogue is absolutely something that you should think of, sorry. And while some of us have maybe never conceived that we've got this inner voice in our heads, I 100% have a voice that's communicating with me either before, during, or even after tasks as well, giving me feedback. And if you're somebody that's listening to this and you're struggling to conceptualize this idea of an inner voice, I'm going to give you the most podcast bro possible example and advice possible. But this morning, I went into the cold water at the spa, and my inner voice will spring into life and it will tell me any single reason on earth to get out of that water as soon as possible. But if you, or like me, have set an intention to go in for a set period of time when you're in there, you will also have a competing voice. You'll have two voices who will be trying to persuade you to stay in longer. So, for example, this morning, I was having this exact conversation inside my head. The hard choice versus the easy choice. The get out now versus the stay in the amount of time that you said you were going to. So my inner voice is saying things like, oh, I think that's 3 minutes now. It's time to get out. Or even if you haven't stayed in for the 3 minutes, you have challenged yourself. Whereas my other voice is very much saying, no, stay the course, test your limits, see what you're capable of. You know that you wanted to do this beforehand, so stick to your word, be a man of your word. And this is good to have these two competing voices. And I think that you can think of this concept a lot of the time. And suppose that's the most vivid example that I can give to you. But if you haven't thought about this before, there's small daily choices that you make all the time. And the example in the question is stairs versus escalator. The type of person I am and the kind of identity I've set out over the last number of years, it's in alignment with my character on a macro level to take the stairs, rather than take the escalator, because that's what a healthy, fit person would do. And it sounds extreme, but every time I make a choice, I do try and do so in alignment with the person I say I am and the identity I have and who I want to be. So the voice, if I'm taking the stairs, is probably saying, good choice, Colin, another right decision, keep going. Linked to this is something that I heard Jimmy Carr speak about, who obviously is well known as a comedian, but he's kind of rebranded himself in the kind of self-development space. And he talks about the 24-hour you and the concept of making decisions today with you in 24 hours in mind. And you can think about the inner voice or the inner dialogue or whatever term you want to use. asking you that if what you're doing now will be something you thank yourself for tomorrow. And I think that's a pretty positive framework for a lot of choices, if not all of them. Question number 4, and I think you guys are going to try and take me down the political route again. Has the UK lost its identity? Simply put, I would say yes, we've lost a lot of what, in my opinion, made the UK a great country, but I don't think it's irreparable or completely out of sight. For starters, some of the things that I think have happened have been things like the resilient spirit of the UK has decreased from generation to generation. I know people always hark back about the war generation, how resilient they were, but things like the erosion of the family unit, social instability, demonization of masculinity, and a weakening of our more traditional elements of our culture, I think those have all played a big role in the UK being less of the Britain that people would from other parts of the world, if they'd never visited or they've maybe read about us in history textbooks or seen us in the movies, would associate with the UK. And then alongside that, the UK has experienced a big changeover in the people that live in the country as well. So there's that whole stat that people always trot out, like the 9,500 millionaires that have left the UK. But I know that a lot of my talented friends who aren't far from millionaires, but are maybe on their route to that, have left the UK in recent times as well. And then the immigration that we've had in recent years has been different to the immigration we had previously, where there's been a much higher level of potentially dependent people arriving in the UK versus people who are here to work in a set job or role. And that's actually a really funny statistic. Equally, if you look at the number of people arriving in the UK from an immigration perspective, they're actually filling a huge hole that's coming from the UK population not taking jobs that they could have taken. So things like the healthcare sector, there's a massive number of people from non-EU countries coming in from that perspective. But alongside all this is people who come to the UK. What has been different about the UK's strategy to changing the population over to maybe other countries is there's not been a basic level of a term called assimilation. And that's for newcomers to the country. And when you immigrate to another country, there's an expectation that you accept, or even to some minor level, start to merge with the host country's values, behaviors, and beliefs. You act in alignment basically with their rule of law and how they act. But if you have communities in the UK, for example, where they've stayed within their own confines, they've not maybe integrated with other elements of society, they almost create separate societies and separate areas, which for me is something that I'm strongly against, because I think if you want to have a functioning society, we want to have people integrated with other cultures, people operating in the same sort of frameworks, and people having the same values and respect for the law. And I'd argue that in the UK in recent years, we have legislated and even policed to enable or at least discourage different ethnic backgrounds from actually integrating with the native British population in a way that we would want it to. And multiculturalism is a buzzword that people throw around. And I asked Zubi about this the last time that I interviewed him in May in Dubai. And I think if you look at somewhere like Dubai, that's somewhere that's done multiculturalism better than the UK. Because when you go to Dubai, whether you're Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, or atheist, you accept their rule of law, you accept their values, you accept their culture. And if you don't, you feel the full force of the law and you likely will have to leave that country. In contrast, the UK has not done that in any shape or form. In fact, the opposite has been the case in many regards. And I feel like we've eroded and policed different groups differently, and also willfully allowed people who maybe speak really ill of the UK or really don't like what the UK stood for previously to come into our country and live here. And I think it's a bizarre situation when you have people who maybe say vocally that they don't like the UK, they maybe hate Christianity, or they dislike our foreign policy, which again is totally up for debate and fair. But they're happy to maybe take our welfare, use our hospitals, use our public services. And that's something that doesn't sit particularly well with me. And as a society, we are far more divided than we should be, when that shouldn't be the case. In fact, when I spoke to James Cooper just before the turn of the year, he was somebody that described himself as British when his mother was Japanese and his dad was Irish, but they moved to the UK as a young family. And he said that he tried to embody British values through the schooling system, through the university system, through the work system before he chose to leave. And that is what I think immigration should look like. People should come to the country and become and feel British and have an identity that matches that. And I think you're seeing now more and more that people are evidently angry about how divided our society is, and more people are speaking about it. Previously, you would have been shouted down and questioned for even raising this topic. And now that it's more public, I think that's positive, but there's a long way to go. And I think I'm probably a believer that we almost need to reverse rather than progress in this particular area. Question number 5. What are the 3 most actionable steps to increase sales conversion? We've got a couple of sales questions back to back here. So for those that are more interested in what I've been speaking about in that space, we're going to get into it just now. So first things first, to increase your sales conversion, you need to take time to understand your potential customer and understand their needs and their wants that they expect to get from your product or service. So what do they expect or want to happen in the moments, the days, the months, the years after they've made their purchase? This must be really crystal clear for you, and you must have notes to this effect written down from your first conversation with that customer. Or if you have a very generic customer type, you should be very aware of what that would look like for your kind of ideal customer profile. Secondly, you want to explicitly share with your potential customer exactly how your product or your service closes the gap between where they are now and where they expect or want to go after buying your product or your service. When they've bought products or services of your type beforehand, what have they achieved? And can you reassure them, maybe through examples of other customers who look and sound just like them, and help them picture themselves getting the same result and the same effect from what you're about to sell them? And lastly, to increase your conversion, agree before sending your final proposal what's required to move forward, what the next steps are, when they'll be considering your offer, what format you can use to discuss or make any amends, and the timescales and the deadlines with all of this as well. So many people send a proposal, send a quote, and it ends up in what I call the sales graveyard. And that's because you haven't done this final step well enough. You might have nailed the first step in the discovery meeting. You might have nailed the second step in terms of matching the product to them. But third, if you don't book time and have clear timelines on when they're going to come back and what the next step looks like, whether it's sending a purchase order, whether it's making a deposit, whether it's making the full payment, whether it's booking in via the link, whatever it is, you need somebody to be really clear on what happens next and give yourself an opportunity to get feedback and make any amends that they need to in order to move forward with you. Number 6, what's your routine before making a sales pitch or presentation? A lot of it will mirror the 3 steps from the last one, which improved my conversion. So first things first, I would review the meeting minutes that we had from the first discovery meeting we had. So that would be things like the client tell me what their plans were, what their requirements were, what their expectations were, what their timelines were, and what their time scales were for implementing. And I would also note down some of the specific language or terminology that they used. And if you did get it from them, you would have data like their budget, their proposed spend, maybe how they pay things up normally in this realm, and have that all really clear in front of you. Secondly, I would then build my proposal to match all the things they told me that mattered, and then outline to them how it does so. So I'll give you an example from my day job where I'm selling furniture to student accommodation providers. So I would say something like, you told me that you replace 150 mattresses annually across your HMO student portfolio. This is across 53 different properties of varying bedroom sizes, and you currently use your building contractors to handle this, but this has resulted in the past in a different quality of mattress, at different price points, and with very little control over timescales and deadlines across your portfolio. In contrast, what we're going to put together for you is we're going to support, and I'm going to deliver to all 53 properties on an agreed date per property. We're going to remove and recycle the old mattress, and we're going to install the new mattress at the agreed spec, the waterproof foam mattress, for a set price of £159 ex VAT, with a supplemental delivery charge for properties that are in the 3 cities outside of the Manchester warehouse. Now, that is an example that I used very recently with a client. We closed the deal to do around 400 mattresses across 80 different properties, and I listed to them back the things they told me that were a problem with what they were doing currently, and then I matched it to a solution that we had. Now, my solution was already purpose-built and ready for them. I've done it for many different clients before, but what I did there is I made sure they felt heard, they felt seen, they felt listened to, they told me what mattered, and then when I presented it back to them, I made sure that my solution met those needs, and it was within the price point that we were going to agree with. One of the last things that I'll do before making any sales pitch or presentation is I'll review with a colleague or somebody that I trust, either through role play or just a walkthrough of the key points that I'm going to do. So for example, that last pitch that I went through just there, that'll be something that I would go through with one of my colleagues just to make sure that from a third party listening, who can see the meeting minutes, who can see the service that I'm going to propose, thinks that the two match. Now, I've done so many of these now in the last 4 years in my current role that this takes a much shorter process than it used to. But if there's a variation to the product or the service, or it's a customer sector that I'm less experienced in, or maybe I'm charging more, or I'm less confident in how I'm structuring the payment terms, then I'll just spend more time role playing it, refining how I land it. So I feel like it's second nature to me before it comes to the presentation, whether it's a Zoom call, whether it's a phone call, whether it's an in-person pitch. I want to be as slick as possible. Now, the last thing that I'll do in terms of routine or things to do before a sales pitch or presentation is I will sometimes share the presentation with a client over email in advance, especially if it's a big, long document. And I'll just mention in an email something like, we're going to walk through this on our call, but you may wish to review some of these areas in advance just so you can structure your own questions or have a good understanding before we jump on the call and we make the most of the half an hour that we've booked out together. That for me just allows you to maybe be pre-briefed on any surprises, or if there's something particularly heavy in terms of text that you're including within there, it gives the client a chance to read that rather than spending your call working on that. So that's the kind of 4 main things that I would do before any pitch to give me the best possible chance of success. And that's sort of my routine. Number 7, you seem like a genuinely really happy guy. I wish I had the same feeling. What do you think helps you? I think happiness is all relative for starters. I would also say, and I would admit, that I'm probably genetically predisposed to be more happy than I am sad. If I look at my family, if I look at my life across the last 32 years, I am typically in a better mood than I am in a worse mood. And I suppose there's genetics to thank for that. And that's certainly not something that I take for granted. But beyond that, and I guess maybe actionably for somebody like yourself that says you don't feel like you're genuinely happy as much as you would like to be, I try and design my life through the things that I can control to support my happiness. Or if not my happiness, then I would say I try and build a life which feels genuinely purposeful and full of moments and tasks which stimulate me, they give me meaning, they give me challenge, and they give me the reward on the other side that comes with that as well. Because I think there's a big difference between happiness and pleasure. You could live a very pleasurable life, and I think many kind of famous party boys on the internet, Dan Bilzerians of the world, will have lived a highly pleasurable, hedonic life, but were they happy or satisfied or content? Probably not. So for me, that would be things like understanding things that I enjoy doing, that challenge me, that stimulate me, and having them in my diary or in my life as non-negotiables. So socially, I know the things that I like to spend my time on, and I won't necessarily just say yes to generic things which society tells us are fun. So going to the same pub since you were 18 every single Friday until the day you die, I'm just not going to be there. Instead, maybe socially for me, it might be going to the golf range, it might be going to a gym session, it might be going for a walk, it might be going for a coffee, it might be going for food, it might be going for a cigar. These are things that I enjoy, whereas I'm much less likely to be involved in an activity if it's heavily alcohol-based or if it's something that I'm not particularly interested in. Exercise-wise, and that's a big part of my happiness or my contentment, I do activities that are challenging and at times tough and unpleasant in the moment, but they're all within a realm that I want to do so and I get a positive feedback loop from. Alongside that, I would say fiscally, and in terms of how I spend my time from an employment perspective, and I've just spoken passionately about sales on this podcast, I work in a role that I find challenging to reach the targets and the metrics that I'm working towards, but I'm also stimulated by activities that I do. I get a kick out of it. I feel excited. I feel like I'm in a flow state at times when I'm talking about it. And then on the other side of that, I feel rewarded for my efforts and it's tangible and I can monitor the progress on the dashboard, on the leaderboard. I can see the improvement in my package and my salary over the years. And these are all areas that largely sit within my locus of control and they impact my happiness alongside, of course, my genetics. And I guess the last hack on a practical level, and you can call this woo-woo if you like, but I've gratitude journaled since March 2020 now. And that's absolutely helped me to crystallize what matters to me. And if you're someone that maybe doesn't fancy doing that over the longer term, that's absolutely fine. But over the short term, when you're writing in your diary on a weekly or a daily basis, the things that crop up continually that you're grateful for and the things that you are writing down or compelled to write down or think you need to write down, they are leaving clues. And they are things that you should spend more time on when it comes to your happiness and your contentment. So if you're somebody that, like the person that's asked this question on Patreon, you seem like a genuinely happy guy. I wish I had the same feeling. There's definitely things you're going to be able to do. Well, of course, acknowledging that people will have different set points and different elements of happiness throughout their life. Question number 8. Do you miss your Mongolian chicken, BRUV? So for those that don't know, Clean Foods Meal Prep, who I worked with for the last 2.5, coming up for 3 years, they have now merged with Prep to Plate, who, if you've seen Instagram, I am now working with and sharing a discount code in their service. But Clean Foods had their infamous or famous Mongolian chicken, which I absolutely loved, and it was probably the dish that I ordered, I don't know, 8 times out of the 10 meals I would get across a week were probably Mongolian chicken. But I have promises from the team at Prep to Plate that they're going to do a Mongolian beef, which arguably is probably even better than Mongolian chicken. So keep an eye out for that, and keep an eye out for the discount code, which will be for Prep to Plate, which will be my new meal prep partner for the podcast and for my nutrition going forward. Number 9, have you ever considered doing a debate-style podcast with more than one guest, similar to the roundtable episodes you do with David and Chris, but with 2 people who perhaps have slightly differing views on the same topic? That's a really good question, and certainly something that I've been thinking about. It is funny, I think sometimes Chris, David, and I all end up largely in agreement, which can be a bit of an echo chamber. So if I was to do a debate style topic, it would need to be a topic that I choose really carefully, and I choose the guests carefully in terms of like having respect for where they come from, because I think my inherent bias that I will have to one side of it would probably become evident. It might become like a 2-on-1 situation. I once listened to a podcast where I can't remember for the life of me who was arguing for gold, but there was a gentleman arguing for Bitcoin versus gold. And at that point in time, it was like 2019, so I didn't really have an opinion on either of the asset classes, really. I wasn't invested in either at that point in time either. And the host was heavily coming in for the gold side, and it kind of swayed my opinion at that point in time. But for instance, if I was to have somebody on talking about longevity and diet and health, then I'm probably pretty open to the different approaches that might fall under that, or the different kind of methodologies that people are suggesting. But then maybe if you had somebody that was wanting to talk about DEI hiring policies, then I'm probably going to side with the person that's slating that, and that's not going to make for a very impartial or objective discussion or points made. So yes, we'd absolutely consider a debate style podcast, but I would probably have to be quite careful around how it was structured, and I would want to give both guests real opportunity and space to express their points without me necessarily chiming in or throwing my weight behind one of them. Number 10, who's in your 2025 hit list for the pod? I've got some really interesting names in mind, and when I was sitting down at the end of last year to reflect on 2024, I was really pleased with the variety of guests that we had on, and there was a number of names on there that I've been aiming for basically the full time I've been podcasting. But I'll say some names just now. Some of these are definitely a long shot, but the ones that I'm calling out just now, I would say are stretching for the show. But if we keep growing, they are within the realms of possibility. And if I write a really good email to their manager or to them, then we might have it. So I would say Bjorn Lomborg is somebody I'm really keen to speak to. Big fan of his book, big fan of his work. James Smith would be great. Jake Humphrey, host of the High Performance Podcast. And a bit of a left field one, if you aren't interested in psychology, you maybe won't have heard of this gentleman, but Jonathan Haidt would be really interesting, and I think would be pretty insightful to those of us who are worried or concerned about the impact of social media and the internet on our brains. Number 11, what 2024 guests are we likely to see return on Cambro this year? I've never been against having guests back on the podcast. In fact, I think sometimes the second conversation you have with them can be more value-led and advice-led, whereas the first time round, sometimes it's more story-led. You go through their timeline, you go through what they've been up to. So off the top of my head from 2024, I would definitely have back on James Cooper when I'm back in Dubai. I thought that was a great conversation, really intense topics. Dr. Julie Gurner, I'm aiming to become an annual guest in the show, kind of September, October time. The last 2 have been amazing. In fact, I think Dr. Julie was probably 3rd or 4th most played of 2024. So that's certainly something that's important. We mentioned debate style podcasts. Maybe not a debate, but a roundtable. Chris Burns, David Hatt, I'm sure there'll be a regular feature again next year. They were on twice last year. Oliver Burkeman has a new book out, which I've got a copy of, which is all about daily meditations. And that would be something that I'd be delighted to have back on the show as well. Number 12, Approaching the corporate workplace with an entrepreneurial mindset, what are some of the skills or exposure you can gain in a corporate environment that will transfer over to starting your own business or even just a side hustle? I think there's loads you can take away from wherever you're working just now, and you could try as much as possible to make the most of what you're spending your time doing. One of the ones that I think is obvious is just the etiquette of working within a business can be quite helpful for what you might go on to do, whether that's diary management, whether it's how you structure your emails. These are just things that are quote unquote best practice. Now, don't get me wrong, there's probably loads of like antiquated practices within workplaces that are terrible, but etiquette around putting a calendar invite in for a meeting, sending a meeting minutes, sending notes. These were all things that served me really well from the insurance industry before I went into the furniture industry. And that more corporate environment served me well in an environment which is a lot less corporate, but my professionalism when I moved into it was really, really beneficial. And how organized I was in my day job and kind of needed to be organized in my day job was something that helped me within the podcast as well. And it's helped me within my sales coaching too, because there's a professionalism that people get from that. Something else I think is helpful is how you manage different stakeholders. And stakeholder management is such a wanky corporate term, but being able to speak to people at different levels within organizations is really important. Whether that's the CEO, whether that's the MD, whether that's the finance director, whether that's the receptionist, whether that's the operations manager, whether that's the guy that works in the warehouse that's a bit gruff, you need to be able to communicate with all these different people. And it's basically practice for you to do that, because you're just employed by somebody, you're just a number within the company. You're getting practice at doing this without the same pressure of if it was your own thing that you were owning. Something I've been thinking about as well is, depending on what sector or industry you're working in, you're basically just building up a bank of industry knowledge and insights while being paid to do so, which is pretty valuable for me. So for example, I'm building up a significant amount of sales knowledge over the last 10, 11 years now, and I've been paid for the privilege of it. Whether that was in the insurance industry, where I built a lot of knowledge about how that worked, and now in the furniture industry, where I have a good really idea of property and a good idea of design, and a good idea of supply chain. These are all things I can take into whatever it is that I decide to do next, whether that's my own thing or whether it's another business or another career as well. And I guess it's kind of second to last is, when I spoke to Daniel Priestley, he spoke about if you were working in a corporate job, but you maybe moved to like a startup or something that had been recently founded, you can treat it as an apprenticeship with the entrepreneur. So you could be directly online to an entrepreneur in the workplace and basically learn how they go from 0 to 1 or 0 to 3 or 0 to 10 in terms of number of employees, number of staff, amount of turnover. And that is something that you're getting paid to do. Again, like an apprenticeship is paid work experience, it's paid opportunity, it's paid learning. And then last and certainly not least is, in the corporate world or whatever job you're in, you're giving yourself the chance and the exposure to build up some financial security that will enable you to maybe build up an emergency fund or a safety net that will cover your expenses, whether that's for your mortgage or your rent or your car payments or your groceries, so that if you do decide to hit the switch and go all in on a business, while you've been working in this environment, you're building that up. Now, you could say, oh, but you could do that through any job. But I would probably rather build that fund while building up skills that are in line or at least complementary to what I might go on to do. And I'm building up the finances to go and do my own thing off the back of it too. Number 13, what is one of your big goals for 2025? Ones that I'm willing to verbalize. I expect to do 9 in-person sales coaching days in Q1. So I've got until the 1st of April to do that. I have 3 booked in January and I have 2 booked in February. Off the back of 2 out of the 3 in January, there'll be follow-up online coaching calls to review, implement, refine, do a bit of a kind of sales surgery mop-up. So there's work that comes off the back of each of these workshops or days, but the workshops or days are like the headline offering. And that's a big goal for me for Q1. I want to have 9 of those. And depending on how that goes up until the 1st of April will very much dictate how much time and energy I can put towards that in the rest of the year. And those 9 will also build a lot of social proof in terms of my ability to go into a company, go into a business, go into a group and deliver results. In fact, and we'll talk about in a minute some of the inquiries that I've had recently, the results that I got with one of the businesses I worked in December, the screenshots and the testimonial that I've got from that already is generating inquiry and people who want to work with me in the future months as well. So while those 9 sessions are in person with businesses or groups, in fact, I've spoken at 2 masterminds now that are like business cohorts rather than businesses themselves. Those are driving inquiry for down the line. So off the back of one LinkedIn post last week where I took a screenshot of the client's feedback on an email and a call campaign script that I wrote for them, the number of appointments and meetings they booked was obviously a great headline. So what I'm being compelled to do is I'm going to build out a format for delivering one-to-one calls with people over like a 5-hour span. So 5 one-to-one calls with 4 of them being like set modules on sales mindset, communication, outreach, discovery meeting, and closing. And then having one session that's bespoke to whatever industry or career or business area that person works in. So I've started taking names and emails for that. So if that's something you're interested in, Instagram or LinkedIn DMs are the best way to register your interest for that. So that, yeah, big goal for 2025, more sales coaching. Number 14, favorite guest of 2024. I am never good at picking favorites. I think that much is clear because I just enjoy everyone that I do, obviously to varying levels and degrees, but I would say I felt very in flow when I spoke to Dr. Julie Gurner. I learned a lot when I spoke to Dr. Robert Glover. He was somebody that I'd consumed a lot of his stuff around knowing Mr. Nice Guy, and seeing him on huge podcasts was quite inspiring for me to have him. I was really proud to host Connor Beaton from Man Talks. The only other UK podcast he's been on is Modern Wisdom, which you would probably class as a US podcast now. So those are 3 that are quite interesting, unique podcasts. I'm in the studio just now. Again, I haven't mentioned that so far, but I'm doing this solo Q&A in the studio to just try and keep increasing the quality of what we're putting out there. But in this very studio in November time, I spoke to Stephen Beattie, who's got an incredibly unique and inspiring story, going from a bit of a tearaway as a youth and somebody that was on the path to death and destruction to somebody now that is giving back to society. He's inspiring, he's motivating, he's a really great person. So that would definitely be one of the ones that would rank up there in terms of my favorites that I came away from kind of buzzing off the back of. Okay, number 15, and when I saw this question, I just laughed, but I guess you're asking more and more politically, so we're going to do it. Initial reaction to Andrew Tate launching the BRUV party. For those who haven't seen, Andrew Tate launched his own party, which is titled Britain Restoring Underlying Values, or BRUV for short. He's also got a policy within it called Daddy. So I think some of it is for comedic effect, but he says he has ambitions to be the UK Prime Minister in 2029, which, if you don't understand the workings of that, he would need to win somewhere around 320, 330 seats to do. So that does sound quite far-fetched. But what I will do is I'll comment on some of the policies that he's put forward that I've read about so far, and what maybe it means for individuals like him if we're treating him like a Trump-style figure for the UK or a Musk-style figure for the UK, what it actually maybe means in the longer term. And equally, I'm going to call out one name who I think would be a far more unifying figure than the likes of Tate. So, 3 policies that I've looked at that I can see some merit in for starters. He wants to reduce foreign aid spending from 14 billion to 0. So instead of foreign aid, he would invest that in modernising schools, repairing facilities, and ensuring that every child in the UK learns in an environment that inspires success, and he would improve the element of entrepreneurship within the school curriculum. Now, he may or may not be compromised there because he's got his own university, his own school, the Real World or Hussle's University, whatever it used to be called. But foreign aid's a really contentious subject, and I used to argue back when I was doing politics at university in 2010 to 2014, because it was a really interesting concept where, and I was mentioning this earlier, like people who say they hate the UK but are more than happy to receive money off the back of it is such a bizarre thing to see. And even back then, and this was like a conservative estimate because I think people don't really want to admit how ineffective the money is, but around 20% was estimated to being lost to corruption, and only about 30% reach people who they intended to reach, because so much of it is siphoned off by supposed charities or bloated quangos and these organisations. So for me, I think foreign aid, particularly the state the UK is in, I would not be strongly against at all. It it being reallocated. Second policy, and I think a lot of people are speaking more about this now, but he would actually enact the Royal Navy to deal with the illegal immigration to the shores of the UK, which I think when you think about it from a safety perspective as well, the people that are in these small boats, so many of them die in the crossing as well. It's just an absurd situation that we're in. And there's already a generous UK legal immigration policy. So people coming illegally, I think, should be discouraged at all costs and prevented as much as possible. Because if you're coming here illegally, you're not giving yourself the opportunity to be integrated in society via the traditional mechanisms that we've got, which I think are failing, but are there. So I think you're off to the wrong foot. And then the third thing that I actually genuinely think BRUV might have right is politicians will be held to account. So 30% of sitting MPs don't meet the expected attendance rate in the House of Commons for votes, for debates, for discussions. So they're literally voting with their feet to say they don't care about the vast majority of subjects or topics which the Parliament is legislating on or discussing. Tate proposes that they would have the blockchain to monitor attendance and it would all be registered on there and they would monitor it. And if an MP falls below a particular percentage that's agreed in advance, they're unseated and a by-election is triggered. So I think that holds politicians to account to actually show up for their constituents and actually be involved in debates. Whereas I think there was the famous screenshot when they were debating the school's meal stuff during 2020 that Marcus Rashford kind of made his name about. And the number of MPs that were in the House was shockingly low. Whereas when they were talking about MPs' pay rises or MPs' expenses, the House was full. Tate's absolutely got that correct. That these people who are paid a salary by the UK, and albeit I think the salary actually should be higher to attract a higher class of politician, they would be held to account. Now, you've got more extreme policies within the BRUV party, which I'm sure you've come to expect given Andrew Tate's personality and potentially some of his viewpoints. But he was looking at capping non-British residents at 10% of the population, which I don't know what that looks like at the moment, but that would be something like 7 million of the 7 million people in the UK from foreign nationals. And I'm sure I would be astounded if it's not considerably higher than that at the moment, because net migration last year was around about 720k. So we're seeing a 1% increase in the population in the UK from non-UK nationals annually right now. And the vast majority of those fall under non-EU. So we are seeing a big change in what the UK's population looks like. One of his more, I'm gonna be generous and say wild ideas, is that he wants weekly referendums, which will enable people to vote weekly on policy and big decisions. That for me is a step too far because I think you already have voter apathy, you have voter fatigue, you have voter disengagement. If you elect your MP, they should be as much as possible your representative for the vast majority of things, and referendums should be for big things like Brexit, like capital punishment is one of the ones. I don't know if that's on their agenda, but don't get me started. And having weekly referendums where people are just continually voting on stuff, I think you become ungovernable, and I think it just becomes a case of populist voting at all times. Albeit, I think that what the population thinks should be taken into account far more than the current political class do. Now, that's a lot of things that we've just gone through there. But let me tell you a little bit why I think this trend matters. Because the likes of a Tate getting involved in UK politics is actually a good thing because he's coming from the outside of the system. However, he may not be the man to do the things that we want him to do. Instead, and I don't know too much about him just at the moment, but people like former SAS operative Ant Middleton is now starting to weigh into politics. And he's somebody that's coming from outside the system. He's somebody that has proven himself to be a heroic individual. He's now operating in the business space. These are people that are bringing a harsh dose of reality rather than the people who are career politicians who've kind of slimed their way up the slippery pole to the top like a Starmer, some of the people that I just find detestable. And while some of the policies that these guys are going to come in with from the outside might seem extreme, they're actually closer to what the general public want than if you look at the current Conservatives or the current Labour Party's manifestos. They are miles away from where people want to be. So while Tate's BRUV party might be a flash in the pan, it might be a publicity stunt, who knows what his plans are with it, I think some of the things that he's putting out there into the world, if we have perhaps more unifying figures, we could see more sensible, more common sense, dare I say it, policies that maybe aren't at the extreme end, but are somewhere in the middle from where we are just now, which I think is a mess, all the way through to where we might want to get towards. Number 6, get me off politics, thank goodness. We're going to be talking about my current training split. I had a hip niggle back in November time, which has meant I haven't been able to do any of the running that I was doing, which I was doing twice a week. So it's gone back to 5 training days most weeks, which is legs, push-pull, legs, upper. Or if I've got the time and I've got the capacity and I've got the energy, then I train 6 days and I do push-pull legs, push-pull legs. That is served me well for such a long time. I think if I was to get back into the high rock stuff, which I know there's a question on later, I would look to do an awful lot more running and some sort of functional training as well within my week. So it would probably be a push-pull legs, a high rocks times 2. That'd be 5 training sessions, and then 2 runs if I could recover from it. I think that would probably be about right. Because when I was doing the high rocks training, my legs were absolutely fried from all the wall balls, all the running, all the skiing, all the rowing. Oh my goodness, the pump in my quads at times was pretty unbearable. So I think that would be a consideration. But right now, push-pull legs, upper, lower. If I'm feeling up to it, push-pull legs, push-pull legs. Number 17, as a sales director in the corporate world, how do you navigate challenges such as negativity or outdated practices that can sometimes arise when working with individuals from older generations? Outdated practices, I think that comes from older generations. Negativity, that can come from all generations because, my goodness, some of the younger people I've worked with in the last couple of years have been quite interesting in the extreme in terms of, 1, their attention span, and 2, their attitude to work at times. But then I've worked with other people that have been really quite inspiring as well from that generation. I think navigating challenges around negativity is the first part of the question. I think you've just got to lead by example as much as possible, but also know when you're spending your energy unwisely. There are particular people that I've worked with that I would not spend a lot of time chatting with apart from what is absolutely necessary. I'm not going to call them on Teams for a catch-up. I'm not going to put a meeting in the diary to review the project until I've got absolutely everything ready to present to them and tell them what the next step looks like and how I need them to help me with that. So avoiding negativity as much as possible, speaking to the people in your work that are positive, almost trying to bring a lighter tone or energy to it than they bring to you is probably 2 of the start points. Outdated practices, I think, and we were speaking about the benefits of working in the corporate world for entrepreneurial standpoints. The last 3 years, I basically got to run the division that I'm in like it's my own business with my revenue target, my profitability target, my resources that I get from the business and I pay for from the business in terms of stock, product, design resource, and then operational resource for delivery, and then customer service resource for like inquiries or calls. Having that there meant that I saw some of the practices that were in place within the business and I could see which ones worked well, which ones didn't. And while just being a typical sales guy, I kind of brutishly just did the ones that suited me and that worked well for my results and for my customers' results and that were still profitable for the business. So dealing with outdated practices, I think, is just trying to lead by example and show again what you think might work better and just doing it and proving they work. Because sometimes it's better to, particularly in the corporate world, if you're getting the chance to and you get free reign enough, ask for forgiveness rather than ask for permission. Because so many people will just say no because they'll always do what they've always done. So for me, trying to bring in enthusiasm, trying to bring in evidence as to why what you're doing is working is going to lead to you maybe bringing other people on side, or at least bringing the people within the organization that you want to come with you on the journey that you're going on. Number 18, what do we think of Zuckerberg getting rid of fact checkers on Meta? I've just watched his interview with Joe Rogan, which I thought was really interesting. But the key thing is, if it's ridding platforms of ideological fact checking, I think it's a good thing. By that I mean fact checking that's driven by an ideology that one particular worldview is inherently better or more moral or more righteous than others, and then using whatever data or information is on that platform to suit that narrative. That was something that happened for a long time. And Zuckerberg actually gave 2 examples when he was speaking to Rogan. The first was in 2016 when Trump and Brexit won. They were considered what I would describe as anti-establishment wins. The media put significant pressure on to fact check or to critique those different arguments because they maybe didn't like the result. And in the same way, he spoke about the C19 period, where from a medical perspective, that event triggered a wave of censoring content, specifically from the mainstream media, putting pressure on content from creators to be censored harder and driven as describing it as misinformation, or that the trust should be in the version of the truth that is being presented by the mainstream and presented by the weight of kind of legacy media. So if we're ridding Meta and Twitter and all these places of quote unquote fact checkers that have one particular agenda in mind, I think that's really positive. But we must be careful now that, in my opinion, the kind of people that I favor are winning. I don't think we should change the method of destruction, the method of control, and kind of beat down the people from the other side. We want free and open discourse. We want people to be able to talk. I think there's elements of X where it's almost gone too far, where you look at the kind of language that's being used on there. Like, some people just every second word is is a slur, basically, and it's like, oh, freedom of speech. That's not really what freedom of speech is really for. Freedom of speech for me was during C19, saying that it was potentially a lab leak, saying that there was issues with the efficacy of masks, saying that maybe you should consider whether you take the experimental medical treatment or not. Those were shut down and censored. I don't want that to be the case, but do I want people to go on there and post hate speech all the time and to threaten people? I don't really mind about that. So I think, depending what Zuckerberg plans to do and how he implements that, I'm in favor of less fact checking and more things like community notes, which I think have been relatively successful on X. Number 19, we'll take a quick drink and we'll get into it. You said that your audience is male dominant. What's one thing you want them to hear from you? I think I've got lots of things that I think are important for men in society today to consider, and some of it's really actionable. Some of it's like practical advice, but what I'm going to share with you is a phrase that I've been saying a lot over the last 2 months, and it's something I was first speaking about with Cruz Leeming on the podcast. If not you, then who? And it's a rhetorical question, and it forces you to consider something important. If you don't take action, if you don't pursue what you said you wanted to, then who will? Because nobody's going to do it for you. No one is going to step up, at least not for the specific circumstances that you're in. And it's a phrase that I'm coming back to lots and lots recently. I'm the only one who can do what I need to do, and you're the same. You listening to this right now, it's on you. It's you that needs to hear. If not you, then who? And yes, you can have coaches, mentors, guides, therapists, managers, bosses, colleagues, teammates. These people around you all matter, and we must lean on the people around us. But deep down, it is all about you. And then the other conceptualism of, if not you, then who? It should encourage you that there's no reason it can't be you that achieves the success that you're thinking about. And I'm going to speak later on about one of the biggest realizations of the last 4.5 years of doing the podcast is a lot of the people I speak to are talented, but they're not completely stratospheric individuals. They're just people who've had success in a particular domain, who've worked really hard, who've applied themselves, who've built their skill set up and have gone for it. So if not you, then who? Because there's every reason it could be you that achieves those wonderful things and gets to that position you want to get to. So that's what I think that anyone listening to this, whether you're a man, whether you're a woman, should get something from. Question 20. 3 primary locations you see yourself working, excluding Glasgow and Dubai. I see a lot of nomads working in Portugal. One of my good friends and one of the early podcast guests, Johnny Rose, he did, I think, 6 weeks in Portugal. I think it was Lisbon last year, and he really enjoyed it. So that'd be one. I've never been to the US, so I know there's probably going to be somewhere out there that would be a real attraction for me in terms of out in the States. So number 2 I'm going to have is TBC somewhere in the States, whether that's the home of podcasting in Austin or not, I don't know. And number 3, I'm going to say Marbella. I'm actually certain that quite a lot of you listening to this will probably have wanted me to say something like a Bali or a Thailand, but I know myself enough that I actually don't really have that much excitement for going there. I do see people out there living a really cool lifestyle, but the idea of like riding around the little motorbikes or scooters just automatically makes it a no for me. I'm sure it's got its appeal, but I like pavements for walking around too much. I'm not going to be a digital nomad in Bali anytime soon. Question 21. We're in the home straight now. Which singular act on your personal development journey has given you the best return? There's lots that I could say here, but we're going to go back to the first one that I think was like the snowball at the top of the avalanche, or the domino at the top of the chain, or the insert whatever example you want to use for the pebble at the top of the landslide. It all started with mastery over how I trained, how I ate, and therefore how I looked. And there's a really shallow element to that in terms of I built a lot of confidence in my appearance and how I felt about myself and how I looked when I walked into a new situation, and it gave me the confidence to feel that way. But with that came a lot of inner confidence as well, and that came from knowing that the shape that I'd built and the way that I stand, the way I feel about myself came from my own actions and the years of effort, which led to this noticeable feature of mine that somebody would say, "Oh, you're in good shape, you look after yourself." And I would say, "Yeah, I do." And these are all the things that I do off the back of that. So I think a lot lies downstream from taking agency of your body, how you fuel it, how you push it, how you help it recover. And being in shape is genuinely the greatest form of self-respect. And respecting yourself is vital when it comes to your personal development journey. Because if you don't respect yourself, then how on earth can other people respect you? Question 22. Seeing that you were out for a few runs during the summer, is High Rocks Call round the corner? It was definitely planned for the first quarter of this year up until November, when I got a bit of a niggle in my hip and my piriformis. I think I'm saying that correctly. And I haven't been able to run since. So as soon as that's feasible, I will be looking to do a doubles High Rocks with my friend Scott. And whether that's I think the one in Glasgow is going to come too soon. I think that might be in April, but I'm sure you can tell me otherwise. And I think it's sold out as well. Although surely one of you listeners will be able to sort me a High Rocks ticket if I needed it. But yeah, there'll be more running again soon. And I mentioned my training split previously. You'd probably look at doing 2 High Rock sessions as well. Question 23. What do you think about Elon getting involved in UK politics? I mean, he can't vote in UK politics, but he can definitely shape the direction of it, whether that's through funding. There's already many, many millions of pounds and dollars being funneled into UK politics to shape decisions, and you can take from that what you will. But Musk talking about UK politics, calling for Farage to resign, was one of the most recent things I think he's talking about. He's talking about the 2-tier policing of the grooming scandal. I mean, he's free to do what he wants. I think he has a huge audience and he has huge sway. I think he has huge fiscal power. Do I think he's going to massively shape UK politics? We'll wait and see. I think X had a big role to play in the US in terms of information that was available and what that pushed people towards in terms of a Trump victory. But we'll have to wait and see what that actually means for the UK. I'm not necessarily sold that he's going to have the same level of impact that he had in the US, but money talks. And if he pumps money into reform, I'm sure he's probably not too enamored by the fact that Tate's got the BRUV party, because that's maybe splitting the vote on the right, or at least the people who are questioning whether the Conservatives are the right party for them, and they may be looking for a right of centre alternative. I think Musk will amplify that. But if he causes a lot of infighting, which I think he is immediately with the Farage thing, albeit I'm not against Farage not being the leader of reform, I don't think he's the be all and the end all, then we'll have to wait and see. Question 24. I've just seen you're speaking at an event I'm going to. Never knew you did stuff like this. Yes, on the 31st of January, I'm speaking at Stephen Clark and Sam Dyer. Stephen's been on the podcast, Sam hasn't. Their mastermind group is called This Is Wealth, and it's a group of investors that I am presenting on sales for 45 minutes in a keynote speech. So yes, I do that sort of stuff. In fact, I spoke at Paul McFadden's Platinum Mastermind, which was back in September. So yes, it's something that I'm doing. It all links into the sales coaching stuff that I'm doing, but it's a one-off workshop rather than coaching. But I'm sure individuals off the back of that workshop will maybe want to speak to me on an individual basis on more specific stuff. So yeah, definitely something I'm doing. Looking forward to it. It'll be 31st of January. If you're in This Is Wealth, then please do make yourself known and come and say hello that you listen to my nonsense on a weekly basis. Question 25. I actually had 3 of these questions, so we'll just group it into one. But why the water filter install? What on earth does it do? And do you actually taste the difference? Got the water filter in the flat in mid-December. Ian was actually in for it because I was on holiday. Mainly driven from a health perspective, and it's really just to try and remove some of the things from the water that could be harmful. Mostly things like chemicals and metals that are in there that we don't really want to be consuming. So things like limescale, chlorine, fluoride, which, just to mention, I don't have in my toothpaste anymore. The last 2 years I've removed that. and then things like lead and some of the parasites that are in our water. Scottish water is considerably better than English water already. We have a lot less chemicals than down south, but the difference in terms of the clarity of my water and the buildup of line scale on like cups and glasses and the sink, even in like a month of having it, is really noticeable. Taste wise, yes, there actually is a taste difference, but that's absolutely secondary to my health. I would say the easiest way to describe it is I would say it tastes softer. So everyone in Scotland knows that our water, even without a filter that I've got on now, tastes better than for London, like a London, for example. When you go to London, the water is borderline undrinkable. It seems like really tough and hard. So there is a taste difference. It tastes better. It's cleaner. It's better for my health, as far as I know. The one that I got was just one that I got online, and I got Stuart McMillan from Plum Squad to fit mine. And if you're in central Scotland, you may be interested. In fact, I think I know that Don Cameron from Crypto Glasgow already got one straight off the back of my post as well. So Stuart, you're welcome for that. And anyone else in central Scotland, you're welcome for that too. Question 26, a crypto question. We've done lots of politics, we've done fitness, we've done mindset, so we might as well do a crypto one. Request for a call and call segment on the top of the bull run price for Bitcoin and XRP. Bitcoin, I think we will see between 130 and 140k this cycle. If it's more than that, then I'm very happy to be proven wrong. If it's lower than that, I'm also very happy, because Bitcoin wise now, I am largely of the belief, and I've just watched the video today that's called What is the Problem? Many of you that are interested in crypto have probably seen it as well. It's gone really, really viral. Got retweeted by Michael Saylor, so that's why I watched it. And I'm going to try and get the presenter of that on the podcast as well. But I'm now quite fully bought into the extent that Bitcoin is a hedge against the likes of inflation. It's a hedge against some of the societal problems that we're going to have. So with a long enough time horizon, I'm willing to buy Bitcoin at any price now. So at the moment, it's at time of recording, this will change, 91,000, happy to buy it. That's not the case for my other three main holdings, which are XRP, ETH, and Borg. I would buy and sell those at different points. And if we're calling out a top for XRP in this cycle, if Bitcoin goes anywhere near 130k, then there's every chance that you see XRP, particularly given some of the movements that are going to happen under the Trump administration and Ripple. And with Ripple, you could see XRP do $7. Now that is wild considering where I've been with it, but I think it's sitting at like 226, 230, something like that just now. So I've got high hopes for XRP, albeit if it did 3, 4, 5, I'd be very happy with that too, because my average buy is like 40, 50 cent, because I've been in it for a long, long time. Final question for this round, it is number 27, and that is your 10 episodes from 300. Congratulations. What's been your biggest personal growth point since starting the podcast? There's been so many things that I've worked on and developed over the time since April 2020. But one of the recent points that I was actually speaking to one of the listeners over on Patreon about, and he's just moved into a managing director role, and he was saying about some of the things he's learned from the podcast that have helped him and able to do that, which was really touching to hear. But one of the things that him and I were going back and forth about was the ability to stand on the shoulders of giants every week and listen to somebody interesting and gain perspective and gain insight and gain advice, but also recognizing that a lot of these giants are quote unquote normal people who have just done amazingly well in the domain they've turned their hand to. And that should inspire you to be successful and aspirational in your field and try and achieve something that stands out for you or is relative within where you're at just now and is progress. So for me, one of the biggest personal growth points has been, if not me, then who? If not you, then who? Honestly, just go for it and push yourself. So growth-wise, it's recognizing that what you're hoping to achieve is almost definitely possible. It's not far-flung. It's not a pipe dream. You definitely have the capability to do so. And it's been done around us all the time. You're getting to listen to people that are within touch and distance through the other end of a microphone, another end of a speaker, another end of a headphone, and you're getting to learn from them. So while I've maybe bemoaned some of the negativity in the environment in the UK just now, statistically, it's still the best ever time to be alive in terms of opportunity. The internet is an incredible opportunity. AI is an incredible opportunity. The network effect, the content we get to consume, the people we get to learn from, and the things we get to apply ourselves in are all really, really positive. So I guess the podcast has made me a very optimistic, confident and inspired person. And that's been a huge point of personal growth. I think I've always been predisposed to be that way, but it's unlocked it to the highest possible level. So that's a wrap for this time round. 10 episodes away from 300. Got some amazing episodes coming up in the next few weeks. Thank you so much for your support. Please do make sure you're subscribed, you're following, you're leaving a rating, and you're sharing the link with any friends or family that would enjoy it. And I will be back to speak to you all again very, very soon.